Hi there, John Moore here, and I am a shamanic teacher. I live in Maine in the US, and today I'm going to talk to you about spirits. I'm going to talk to you about the different spirits that shamans in different cultures and shamanic practitioners may work with, and kind of how that works. I'm going to talk about gods and goddesses and nature spirits and helping spirits. I'll keep it a little short, a little brief. There's a lot of kind of technical detail that I won't really go into, and I also don't want to overstep my bounds with cultural knowledge that I don't necessarily have. I don't have expertise in a lot of different cultures' spirits. So I'm going to talk obviously from my own perspective, but I'm going to explain a little bit about how the mechanics of spirit and how spirit works, individual spirits work with shamans, and shamans work with spirits and that sort of thing. So here we go. So shamans, if you don't know, always work with helping spirits. We have a number of helping spirits that we might work with to do healing or divination or spiritual development work or other things, and the word that always comes to mind when I think about this is relationship. We're always in relationship with spirits. Now, there are shamans in cultures all over the world, and those shamans will have their own cultural overlay on top of their practice. So, for example, a shaman in Nepal will work with Buddhist and, perhaps Bon and other deities and local spirits and all of that sort of thing, where somebody in South America will work with the animal spirits that are more prevalent there, so that sort of thing. So there's always this cultural overlay with shamanism as well, but that doesn't mean that that there are differences, but the similarities are still there. The fact that shamanic practitioners always work with helping spirits, that's a commonality that runs across cultures. So there are many, many, many different types of spirits. And when you think about spirits, if you don't have experience working with lots of different spirits, you might think of, we think generally of non-physical entities, personalities, ghosts. We might think of gods and goddesses, or what have you, and those are things, but it's important to remember that we are also spirits. Even though we have a physical body, we work in the physical realm most of the time. Most of our interaction, when we're awake anyway, is with physical stuff. Our senses take in data from the physical world. We move things in the physical world. We interact things in the physical world, and sometimes that leads people to believe that we either are a body that has a spirit, or that we don't have spirits at all. My viewpoint is that we are spirits. We happen to have bodies that we also inhabit. And the shamanic worldview is animistic, meaning all things have a spirit, but the way I view it is all things are a spirit. Some things have physical representation. So if I pick up this coin has a spiritual essence to it. It has a spiritual representation, but it happens to be a physical object that has physical presence as well. But when we think of spirits, very frequently we think of things that don't have physical bodies. And there are many, many of them, more than I could count. Many different types of them, more than I could count. And shamanic practitioners will interact with a number of these. So I want to break down a little bit of the metaphysics of how that works, and it might make things a little bit clearer. So as human beings, we are a spirit. We have multiple layers. I like to think of humans like an onion, where you peel the layers and there's more and more onion underneath, right? There's more and more human underneath as we peel the layers. We have a physical body, and in some systems of spirituality, they talk about having different bodies. And this is a metaphor. Obviously, it's a model. It's not perfect, but it works for the sake of this conversation, this discussion, that we can talk about different bodies. So we have a physical body, we have an energy body, which we might call the etheric. If you know of the aura that surrounds the body, that is the sort of the edge of the etheric body. And there's an etheric double that is closer, that more closely follows the lines of the body. And many people who are clairvoyant can see this. A lot of energy therapies work on this. Reiki, acupuncture, Tai Chi, Qigong, martial arts work with the energy body. Now, the energy body is very close to the physical, meaning that I can manipulate it through physical movement, and I can manipulate physical aspects of my body through energy work. Acupuncture is a great example of that, right? Reiki is a great example of that. Some shamanic work works on the energetic body, works on the etheric body. Below that, we have the as we move down these layers or up, whichever metaphor works for you. The bodies go from really, really dense and holding shape and having mass and being time and space dependent, to being less and less so, become subtler and subtler and subtler, meaning they're moving away from the physical. I cannot physically shapeshift. Haven't learned that skill yet. Maybe someday, who knows? I can't physically shapeshift, but in shamanic journey, I do shapeshift, and so do other shamanic practitioners. It's very common, so do the spirits, because that is the astral body. And you might have heard of astral projection or out-of-body experiences, what have you. And that's what we're doing when we journey. And the astral is very flexible. It can be shaped by thought, for example. And there are lots and lots of spiritual systems that use this, in sort of Western spirituality, Western esoteric spirituality. They might assume God forms, or imagine, or have meditative practices where they're imagining shapes or that sort of thing. They're working with astral substance, the through either force of will or through manipulating astral material. And you might have heard of like earth, air, fire, and water, the basic elements, or in more Eastern systems, they have wood, metal, earth, air and fire, something along the water and fire. I'm not an expert in that, but they have slightly different elements, but it's kind of the same thing, the same representation. And so the astral is more formless, or has less form, is less dependent upon time and space, which is why shamanic practitioners can look back in time and look at future probabilities, and can journey for 5 minutes and it feels like it's been 45 minutes, because time and space break down a little bit at that level. And so this is important because a lot of the spirits we work with are astral, and like humans, they probably have multiple layers to them. They probably have etheric and astral and some other bodies to them, but we're primarily physical. And a lot of spirits, like ghosts and nature spirits, or spirits of place, or house spirits, that sort of thing, are astral. Their primary way of interfacing with reality is astral. And as such spirits that are primarily astral, they tend to have more form than some other spirits, which I'll talk about in a moment. And they tend to be tied to location. So if I work with the nature spirits, which I do, I'll work with the nature spirits that are in the area that I'm physically in. I generally won't go, because I would have to actually travel in astral form, which happens sometimes, to work with nature spirits in a different area. Most of the time I work with nature spirits that are here, because they are somewhat tied to location. They're somewhat tied to time and space, less than we are as humans. I have They can pass through what we think of as spiritual or as physical matter, because they don't always interface at that level. But it's close. It's close. So at another level, we have the sort of the mental body, and this is where time and space starts to collapse a little bit. And this is where symbols are things, and there's pure consciousness and thought forms and all of these things. And this is where we tend to get gods and goddesses that we work with. So you might, whatever your belief system is fine, but you might pray to God, or you might pray to an archangel, or you might pray to, some deity from some pantheon, right? And somebody on the other side of the world is praying or working with the same deity, because they're not constructs, but there are spirits that exist that primarily interface on the mental level. They are symbols, but not symbols in the way that we think of them. Not like, I just draw a picture and that's a symbol of something. They are symbolic in that they're conscious, they're spirits, they have multiple bodies, they can interact astral, etheric, physical, but they primarily interface at the symbolic level, which is why I can work with deities that somebody else across the world is, because they are completely untied to time and space. Location doesn't have as much meaning for them. They can act locally. They're very, and this is not to take anything away from them, very powerful. And when we form images of gods and goddesses, one of the things that's really interesting is that many gods and goddesses have different interpretations. If you look at, I won't get into a religious argument with anybody, anywhere, ever, but let's assume for the sake of argument, even if you don't believe this is the case, that Jesus is a representation of God, or is, whether you believe he was a human being that walked on earth, or whatever. We'll just say for the sake of argument that Jesus was a person, but also a representation of God, or a part of God, or part of the Trinity, or, there are lots of different beliefs about this, but just for the sake of argument. Well, there are many, many different images of Jesus, and obviously one that is extremely popular in the world is, Western Renaissance painters turned Jesus into a white European male, which, if he existed, he was definitely Middle Eastern, and probably, did not have blonde hair and light skin, and would have definitely had very, very dark skin living in the region of the world that he lived in. Even if his skin was naturally light, he would have tanned. But he most likely as a human. But that doesn't mean people can't look at a painting of Jesus or a statue of Jesus and do their worship and do their prayer and not get the same effect, because that's a representation. The God that he represents is pure, not pure, but comes from that mental plane. And so people around the world can have different types of images of Jesus. And I've seen dark skin representations of Jesus, and I've seen the Black Madonna and all kinds of, which isn't Jesus obviously, but lots and lots of different representations. And that's not really all that important, what the painting looks like, except from a political standpoint. Has nothing to do with spirituality, has nothing to do with how you interface with that God. I have behind me, I'll grab this. I have this statuette, this little statue of, this is the Norse god Odin. And I have several statues of the Norse god Odin, and they're all very, very different. And when you see representations from ancient Norse culture over the years, the representation changed, and he's depicted sometimes as a warrior, and sometimes depicted as an old man with a floppy hat, which is where we get images of like Merlin and Gandalf and all of that stuff from. Sometimes he's got a cane, sometimes he's got a spear, sometimes he has animals around him. in the end, it doesn't really matter. These images are just meant as interfaces. They're meant for us to interact, to pray, to generate the feeling, to help us communicate, help our human minds to communicate with these spiritual beings that are well beyond that. So these you can see now that there are, there's spirits that exist on lots and lots of different levels, and there may be or probably levels that we don't have access to because we can't necessarily conceive of them. What's beyond the mental might be, pure divinity, but maybe there's, layers between that. And what I have found during shamanic practice is that there are very subtle levels, or we might call them frequencies or something like that, in different spiritual realms. And these spirits have different levels of access to them as we do. We have different and you can think of it as like, I have a radio in my car and I can tune that to a lot of local stations. I have access to a lot of radio stations that are close enough and have a powerful enough signal for my radio to receive them. However, there are radio signals from around the world in passing through my car that either I don't have the radio doesn't have the capacity to pick up those frequencies. I don't get shortwave radio, for example, in my car, or they're not strong enough. So, an AM or FM radio broadcast in, coming from, the International Space Station or something. I don't know what frequencies they broadcast on, but even if they were, that might be so far away and the signal would be so weak that my radio really wouldn't be able to translate that into sound that I could hear. And the same is a little bit true for us. And, when we practice shamanism, we learn to tune to different frequencies, which we might call worlds or realms or non-ordinary reality, or, lots and lots of different terms. Again, these words are symbols, and they're always inadequate. They never can completely describe the experience of what we're going through. They can just sort of point to it. And the same is true for images that we have of gods and goddesses and different spirits. Even the images that we have in our head, or if we interact with spirits and see them, that's not the whole picture. It's like if I meet you, and even if we got to know each other over years and had lots of conversations and stuff, I would not completely know everything about you. I would not know all of what's in your subconscious. You don't know everything that's in your subconscious. So I can only know interfaces and symbols, and that's fine. That's okay. But I understand that. And understanding that is a powerful thing. Having that tool to, the tool of knowledge to know that I am dealing with an interface. I'm dealing with a symbol. I'm dealing with, we might call it a throne, and an enthronement, when I create a symbol in my mind of a spirit to step into and interact with me. That is, enthronement or enshrinement in some systems. In Shinto temples, for example, they might have a special mirror or something where they enshrine a certain spirit that they work with. And that's what it is. It's not that it's not that they've captured this spirit and it can't leave and they're wrangling. It's not like that. It's that they have created an interface for this spirit. And I apologize if I'm using the wrong words or misrepresenting Shintoism. I don't mean to. I am speaking from a layperson's perspective. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I hope that is a little bit enlightening way to think about different spirits and how we might work with them and how they exist on different layers. And like us, all spirits have sort of main interfaces. They have main places where they show up, where ours is physical, but that doesn't mean they don't have other interfaces, meaning I can interact at the etheric or the astral or the mental or the pure spirit divine level. I can do all of that, but this is where I spend most of my time, in the physical. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you're happy and healthy. Please subscribe to my channel. Lots of stuff coming up. There's lots of stuff there, but lots of stuff coming up. And I will talk to you real soon.